I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need you can count on me.
Vegetables pancakes,
sal col cozido batata,
tofu,
甜贝。
Talihilo broccoli.
I am a vegetarian because I like animals, so I don't want to hurt them.
I practice sustainable food system by supporting local organic farmers. Therefore, I can have a whole food plant-based diet. In order to avoid packaging, I minimize buying and eating processed foods.
I live a sustainable lifestyle by bringing my own shopping bags when I go for groceries, so I have to use single-use plastic bags. And I try to eat seasonal vegetables whenever I can.
My way of maintaining a sustainable plate is buying local and seasonal in order to reduce carbon footprints.
And for me, good food for all means that nobody gets hungry and that everybody has access to nutritious meals.
My way of maintaining a sustainable plate is to making sure the foods are being well used.
I think reducing the chance of eating out can reduce the carbon footprint.
And good food for all means that everyone can have nutritious and appetizing food without harming any animals.
我支持永续食物系统的方式呢，就是尽量选择吃蔬食，那减少摄取动物性的制品。那除了能减少碳排放以外呢，还可以维持身体健康。
حتى نحافظ على بيئة نظيفة، أحبك على أن نستخدم مصادر الطاقة الطبيعية بدلاً من البترول.
Why there's no fish in this bowl of laksa?
So that we can save the ocean.
Yes, also we choose meatless and dairy-free.
Because factory farming is no good for the
environment. Save billions?
Go vegan.
Save billions?
Be vegan.
Food brings us together from different corners of the world, and that is why we are here today. Hello everyone, welcome to our International Youth Day Roundtable live stream, Young Leaders in Action, My Sustainable Plate. My name is Shanda Heng, and I'm a volunteer with Chi Foundation. I'll be your MC today. Before we dive into the roundtable, let me share with you some Zoom etiquette. There'll be 3 etiquettes to follow. First, please stay muted as to not interfere with the roundtable. Second, please switch on your camera if you feel comfortable doing so. And lastly, the Zoom chat can be used for relevant thoughts and comments. Young Leaders in Action, My Sustainable Plate is organized by Chi Foundation. This event is in support of the International Youth Day 2021 team, the campaigns, Act for Change and Good Food for All, as well as the Food System Summit dialogues governed by the United Nations for the Achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. For those who are not familiar with what we do at the Chi Foundation, the Chi Foundation is an international humanitarian organization founded by Master Cheng Yan. whose mission is to relieve the suffering of those in need. Chi is also a strong advocate for environmental protection, and they always act on the premise that one can protect the environment by the choices one chooses, which is why we co-organize this event. If you would like to learn more about it, please follow our social media. There are three things we hope you'll be able to take away from the event. First, learn about the food system and the role we play in achieving sustainable development. Second, engage with people around the world who share the same passion, especially during the pandemic. And the most important of all, we hope that you get inspired and feel empowered to take action on creating a sustainable future for all. We have 5 amazing guests with us today. Please say hi and tell us where you are joining us from. First off, Dustin Liu, our moderator, who is a teaching fellow at Harvard University.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Gender. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I'm calling in from Boston, Massachusetts. Really excited to be here.
Thank you, Dustin. So now our speakers. Eduardo Garay Lagos, who is the Adjunct Director of Kushner Impact Foundation.
Massachusetts. Really excited to
Hi, everyone. I'm more than happy to be here with you. And I am joining you and calling you from Minnesota, the state of Minnesota from the US.
Our next speaker, Hui Oh Yang, the Food Policy Officer at Good Food Fund.
And I am joining you.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Beijing, China.
Xingyi Xu, a nutrition educator from Columbia University.
Hi everyone, I'm Xingyi. Nice to meet you all. I'm calling from Suzhou, China.
And lastly, Charlene Xia, an ocean engineer from Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Hello everyone, happy to be here. I'm calling from Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA.
So thank you, and we will hear more about their expertise in a little bit. I know that we have people joining from various countries, so feel free to drop in the chat where you are joining us from. Now, let us share with you our agenda for our event. We started with the event's opening and we are almost done with. We'll be having a warm-up game following right up, then the roundtable, and lastly, the Q&A session. To the warm-up game we go. So, have you ever thought about how the food that we eat comes to our plate? From housing to transporting to storing and processing. This complex web of activities is known as the food system. There are many issues in the food system. Let's start the game now to see how well you know about the issues. Let's do it. Speakers, so feel free to join in the game as well. On screen, you can either scan the QR code or type slido.com on your devices. Once you head to the page, type in your name. Hit join and see your name pop up on screen. While we wait for everyone, let me share how this quiz would work. We will have 5 multiple choice questions, and for each question, you have 30 seconds. Select the answer during the time frame. Once the timer runs up, the correct answer will then be revealed. So let everyone grab their mobile devices and join in this quiz. I'll give everyone a few minutes and you will see the counter right at the top corner rise. Right, last few seconds for everyone to join in before I start the quiz. I see the counter still is increasing rapidly. Right, I think we are coming to a slower stop now. And I'm going to start the quiz in 3, 2, 1. So our first question, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 690 million people suffer from hunger globally. This means that 8.9% of the world's population is constantly hungry.
Huge government grants and support.
By 2030, how many people are projected to suffer from hunger? Last few seconds. Send in your answers. All right, time is up. The answer is 840 million. Our next question. As compared to developing countries, food waste is a bigger issue in developed countries. 1.3 billion of food is wasted each year. How much more do you think a European or North American consumer wastes as compared to a typical African consumer? The answer is 15 times more. So a typical European or North American consumer wastes typically around 220 pounds, which is 100 kilograms of food annually, and that is an insane amount. Our next question. Worldwide obesity has nearly tripled since 1975. Research shows people today eat an average of 600 calories more per day compared to people in the 1970s. How many calories would you need to burn to lose a pound of fat? And the answer is 3,500 calories. So congratulations to those 25% that got it right. Our next question. Various studies around the world confirm that vegetarian diets provide sufficient amino acids if a variety of plant sources are included. Which vegetables directly consist of the 8 essential types of amino acids we need? Right, 5 more seconds, send those answers in. And the answer is all of the above. So a plant-based diet can actually provide enough protein if one eats a variety of vegetables. Our last question. Packaging like chips bags and plastic bags make up around 1/3 of our landfills. How many seabirds and sea animals are killed by plastic bags and or trash each year? The answer is 1 million. And that is why it is so important to pack a trash-free lunch and avoid using unnecessary packaging. So let's have a look at our leaderboard. So congratulations, Ellie, for getting the top score. And second place, we have Catherine, third, Stephanie, fourth, Sherry, and the fifth place, Ching. So congratulations. So thank you everyone that joined our quiz. Before I pass the stage to our moderator, Dustin, let me inform everyone that we have a Q&A board on Slido. Feel free to drop all your questions there while the roundtable discussion is in progress. Passing the stage to you, Dustin.
Thank you so much, Chandler, for setting up such a wonderful and fabulous dialogue. And of course, gratitude to the Tzu Chi Foundation for providing the space for this important topic. First and foremost, happy International Youth Day. I think it's an important reminder that young people hold expertise and they need to be brought to the table as serious decision makers that have true insights to contribute to these important issues. I am incredibly humbled to be joining you as the moderator for today's dialogue. And as we have already explored in these wonderful poll questions, we are facing really critical issues in our food system. I'm excited to see so many young people join us today, joining a truly global movement for a safe, accessible, sustainable, and equitable food system. And even more than that, I just want to take a moment to thank you for joining us today to learn, share, gather, and act. for food systems transformation. Before we begin, I know that we have a lot of folks here in the Zoom space with us, and we want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need to engage actively with our speakers. So to kick off, I'd love to invite everyone to just go ahead and drop a smiley face in the chat. Any type of smiley face will do. Just go ahead and throw that in there so we know that you know where that chat box is. Awesome. We're going to wait for 136 smiley faces to come in just to make sure that everyone has access to that, encouraging you to use that chat space as much as possible in order to your reactions. And the second thing that I'd invite you to do as you send those smiley faces in is to go ahead and just react with a thumbs up. We want to make sure that you know how to use the reaction buttons. If we were in person, we'd be tracking around the room, making sure that you folks were tracking with us. So just encouraging you to use those reactions during our presentation to make this as engaging as possible. I feel like I'm at a dinner table with a bunch of great friends, and I'm really excited to invite you there as well. Now we will have a brief opportunity before we jump into a more open, moderated discussion to have a chance to hear from all of our esteemed panelists. We've asked each of them to take on 2 critical questions. The first, what do you do and why do you do it? And the second question is, why are you so passionate about food? What brings you to this conversation today? Our speakers will have the hard task of packing all of that information in a quick 5-minute speech before we move into a more open dialogue to really tease out some themes that we're hearing from these speakers in this initial remark. Let's go ahead and start and pass over the virtual floor to Eduardo Garelagos. Eduardo, inviting you to start us off. What do you do and why? And why are you so passionate about food? Passing it over to you, Eduardo.
Fantastic, Dustin. Thank you for the introduction. I have actually a brief presentation that I wanted to share with y'all. So hopefully you're all able to see this. Well, thank you. First of all, I am actually really glad. I'm really happy of being in here with you today. At the same time, I'm also really humbled and inspired of the fact of actually being here and seeing such amazing people and seeing that you're all committed as well towards these bigger problems that we're actually facing, such as food security. So in order to get us started, I actually wanted to do some icebreakers because before actually telling you what I do, I wanted to share a little bit of my background and where I actually coming from. So first of all, I am native from Honduras, Central America. That's a really small country in Central America. However, don't get me wrong, small country, that also means people with big hearts and people very passionate and committed towards what they're doing. At a very young age, that's actually something really fun and interesting about me. At a very young age, I was interested in actually serving my community. So that's one of the reasons that actually led me to volunteer as a firefighter since I was 15 years old. And on the other hand, one of the really important things that actually define me is just my passion and amaze overall towards nature. I think that it constantly reminds me of the fact that probably a greater force is the only force that is actually able to create something as beautiful and as gorgeous as our planet. And just for the mere fact that we don't have any planet B. So it constantly reminds me of that. We don't have any planet B. We have to adequately manage and sustainably manage our natural resources. And therefore, we all have to take action into these great tasks that we have, such as food security. So again, going a little bit back to my roots, Honduras, maybe some of you know, some of you might not know, but Honduras is very well known for its coffee production. We might not be the ones that produce the greatest quantity of coffee. However, we produce amazing quality to die for. So I guess that if you already if you like coffee or if you dislike coffee, I honestly motivate you to actually try a cup of coffee. Maybe I can bet that you have already tried a cup of coffee that is from Honduras. And I guess that, well, in the name of my country, I want to thank you for your business and keep you motivated and actually keep drinking coffee. But well, more importantly than that, I think that this is one of the main reasons as why agriculture actually is rooted since I was born. And more importantly, that actually takes me to my journey. So very early, I wanted to actually serve in something that was actually bigger than me, a greater purpose. And I realized that agriculture was a perfect opportunity of doing that. Actually, I was fortunate enough of going to Zamorano University, which is considered a Pan-American school. The reason why it's called like that, it's because it's a school where people from all Latin America can assist. And that actually gives you a broader perspective of other problems that are going on besides your own country. And they have this amazing mystic called learning by doing. And what that means is that basically in the morning, you would learn in a classroom the whole mechanics behind driving a tractor. And on the afternoon, you would actually get to drive the tractor itself. So So that actually gave you a really good concept of reality of what agriculture means, because agriculture seems almighty easy on paper and in theory, but believe me, it's way more hard than that. Then I started doing some soil science extension, teaching, and as well working with nationwide producers. And I quickly realized that I was curious and still I needed something else. That's what led me to graduate school. I ended up getting my master's degree. And as a matter of fact, I'm currently pursuing my PhD degree in soil, water, and climate. I'm a very passionate guy. I like speaking for science. And more importantly than that, I love the applicability of science, because I believe the power of academia is nothing without the actual applicability of that science into our daily lives. And that actually is what takes me to this impact mindset that I constantly have. Just the idea, if we take a look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we realize that we cannot attack these goals on a silo approach, but we actually need transdisciplinary approach, collaboration, new ideas, and just people that actually can create a synergistic effect towards these huge problems such as food security. And again, that also leads me to my current position as an adjunct director of the Food Security Impact Investing Program from the Kirchner Impact Foundation. One of the mottos that I have learned from working for this organization that I would love to share with you is just the mere fact that probably they believe that every business can actually be improved. However, they also believe that every business has the task of making this world a better place. And that has been something that has absolutely changed my life. Now, to close up, I think that within this transdisciplinary aspect, I think that probably one of the reasons why I chose soil science is just because of the fact that every living organism depends on soils in the end. And more importantly, that also reminds me that I am always committed and passionate towards working within agriculture and finding solutions, because without agriculture and without farmers, we have no food. And with no food, we have no future. Thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for keeping it brief, but really starting out with a nourishing story of your own change-making journey. Really appreciate this idea that your personal story, your personal narrative connects to the work that you do. You also raised the Sustainable Development Goals, and I just want to take a minute for folks who are unfamiliar with this to talk a little bit about what they are. In the year 2015, September 2015, the General Assembly at the United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and that includes the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that Eduardo was talking about. And these are built on this principle of leaving no one behind. And this new agenda emphasizes really a holistic approach to achieving sustainable development for all. And what Eduardo was referring to were the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that you can see here. And within these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we actually have 169 targets that represent a universal agenda. And like Eduardo was saying, these are integrated, they're indivisible, and they really balance these three dimensions of sustainable development that we will touch on today: the economic, the social, as well as the environmental. And I think, Eduardo, another resonant point for me is that this is not just a framework for countries. This is not just a framework for the United Nations. This is actually a framework that young people can use in their own change making. I'm really excited to see how you've seen the intersections of this larger global agenda in your own change making journey. So Eduardo, thank you for those brief remarks. We'll pass the floor over to Hui Yu. I'm going to invite you into this conversation now. What do you do and why? And why are you so passionate about food?
Thank you, Dustin, and many thanks to the organizers for having me here. It's my great honor. To answer the question of why am I so passionate about food, I grew up with my grandparents. They always taught me not to waste any food by telling me how they used to be starving when they were young, which impressed me a lot. Later, when I found out that how much feed, which basically grains, are used to raise animals for food consumption, and how many times more meat we consume than needed, I was shocked. Compared with the food waste on our plate, overconsumption of meat causes way much more food produced just to feed the animals, which is inefficient and causes huge animal sufferings, not to mention the zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. My grandparents starved when they were young. Today, we are able to make a comfortable living that pays for food. But today's world is still in trouble. 3 billion people can't afford healthy diets. This is the world that we have made. A shame on planet Earth that every 5 seconds, a child dies of malnutrition and hunger. And we still have slaveries in today's food systems. Those fishing slaveries who are trapped in the ghost fleets, those men and women who work in meat processing plants and slaughterhouses. A shame on planet Earth that we still want to eat more and more meat, and we want to eat a meat-centered diet like what we believe Americans do. Our current food systems contribute to ongoing health crisis, climate emergency, and biodiversity breakdown, and the worst human rights violations and abuses. We have to act now. And to reflect on what I do, I'm now the campaign lead for the youth-led Act for Food, Act for Change. I'm so proud to be in the core group of this global campaign together with other 30 youth leaders across the globe, facilitated by the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, GAIN, and Food Foundation and UN Food System Summit. The campaign takes the form of a simple pledge and a list of 17 actions. The pledge will unite all the youth. We already have galvanized over 10,000 signatures, and actions for change will enable the youth to campaign and act in their own countries and communities. To name a few of the 17 actions, promote plant-based diets, stop deforestation and make livestock farming more sustainable, put a stop to unsustainable fishing, among the others. We convened a Mandarin dialogue on the Actions for Change, which is the first of a series regional dialogues, and have nearly 100 youth participants who really amazed us with their insights and ambitions for bold actions. The 17 Actions for Change also provide them a great opportunity to see the complexity of a food system. Food system is still a very new concept for many of us. People think of reducing waste, ending hunger when they talk about food issues, but many people don't have the awareness of how our diets really links to not only the health of ourselves, but also the animals and our planet. Promoting the 17 Actions for Change really educate the public that food system is a systematic issue and requires systematic approach to take actions. Beyond promoting the campaign, we also have translating some really useful learning resources like the What is Food System pamphlet by GAIN and a Coursera course, Transformation of the Global Food System. And as we really don't have this kind of resources to educate people, especially the young generation on food systems here in China, and have really taken a lot of effort to promote food literacy, identify motivate youth actions, and also develop a new generation of future leaders. Back to you. Thank you.
I think we experienced a little bit of a lag at the end, but I think we captured the main idea of your initiative. Wei, thank you so much for those remarks. I appreciate how you started once again with a personal story. This idea that food is so connected to all of us is certainly something that's resonating with me. And I also appreciate that last graphic, how we're moving beyond the why food systems are important, but more importantly, how we act on them. These 17 actions are just so critical for us to equip young people with the clear action to make a difference in their food system. So Hui, thank you for your leadership on convening these dialogues and for the work you're doing to push forward food systems transformation. I'm gonna pass the floor over to Charlene now. Charlene, welcome to our dialogue. Really excited to have you here. Would love for you to talk a little bit about your innovations. What do you do and why, and how is it connected to food systems more generally?
Yeah, of course, happy to share. And let me share my screen. So a little bit about my background. I come from a more technical engineering background. I am a graduate student at MIT in the mechanical engineering department. And I also did my undergrad master at MIT. So I am very technical in this situation. And I'm thinking about coming to present an idea of solving the food system and the current food challenge that we're facing in a more technical way. So a little bit about what I do. I work on ocean, and I combine my passion for the sea with my passion for food. And the current project I want to introduce to you about is intelligent seaweed management system. And let's first talk about why we should focus on seaweed. So seaweed in China, you might encounter it on sushi. You might see it, on a seaweed salad or miso soup. It's actually pretty common in the Asian diet, very, very popular. So the seaweed is, first of all, a sustainable food source. It is delicious throughout. It is very nutritious, high fiber food source. And also the really cool thing is that when you grow seaweed, you don't really need any additional input into growing it, but instead it grows very naturally in the ocean. So it is almost like a net zero, mostly actually positive in terms of like the environmental impact that it has. And let's talk a little bit about the positive environmental impact that seaweed had as you're growing it. So when seaweed grows in the ocean, you can think of it as the leaves on a tree before the water. And the really cool thing about seaweed is that this entire structure of seaweed is basically the leaf of a tree. So the entire structure is performing photosynthesis. And the photosynthesis cool thing is that it's absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and from the ocean as it grows. And therefore, it is sequestering the carbon that's causing global warming and also taking away carbon from the ocean, which is causing the ocean acidification, which is the two big challenges that we're facing right now with climate change. Another really cool thing is that in nature, where you find seaweed is that you actually find it growing along with fish and shellfish, because that's how nature intended to be. It's almost like part of the ecosystem. So we have fishery, fish farm that grows a lot of fish, but we have taken it out of the context of the environment. But what we're trying to bring back is the entire holistic scale of farming under the ocean. So by bringing back seaweed into the ocean, it absorbs the excess runoff nitrogen from the fish, which is the poop of the fish, which is nitrogen and phosphorus, and it recycles it and able to provide oxygen back to the fish for them to breathe. So it's almost like helping out the environment. And that's like the whole cyclic farming technique. And now that you can understand what's so cool about seaweed, you also need to know that it is actually a very, very big industry. And this is a sky view of the seaweed farm in Korea. Each one of those little like tiny black square are seaweed plots. So it is a huge industry. You might not see it always in a restaurant, especially in the Western culture, but it's actually everywhere. It is actually in your toothpaste, because you use it as a gelling agent. It is in a lot of food additive, a lot of jello, especially plant-based jello or etc., are all come from seaweed. And also, surprisingly, a lot of medicine that does the encapsulation is also part of seaweed. So it is actually an incredible industry, and it is expanding very rapidly. And here is the problem. When the seaweed expands really rapidly, and because of the global climate change, the problem that we're facing with seaweed production is that there's a lot of diseases that's happening, and diseases wipe out the entire farm, which is really devastating. So my project is to develop a sensing mechanism to put in the seaweed farm to monitor how healthy the seaweed is, to prevent diseases from happening, just to prevent them from getting sick. And this is the whole way of saying, like all this technology that I'm working on, everything I'm doing, why am I doing this? It really comes down to how much I love food and the fact that we all know, and the reason that we're all here is that food brings people together. And this is just one part where I believe that we have a lot of potential to solve multiple problems with food. First, we can solve the world hunger problem because it is, we're producing food. And second, not only we're solving the world hunger problem, we're also solving the climate change at the same time with seaweed. And my ultimate goal is to just able to share a meal together across the entire world where everybody has food to eat, but not just at this moment in time, but for the future and thousands of years beyond our lifetime. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Charlene, I've heard you talk about this for quite a few times, and every time I hear about it, I'm still super amazed and blown away. So thank you for bringing your technical expertise and showing us that there are so many avenues to make change in food systems. I also really love this last idea of the fact that food brings people together, right? This idea that we really are facing food systems as the core to community building, the core to so many different other sustainable development goals, and the fact that this is truly such an intersectional issue. Charlene, thank you for those those remarks. And Xingyi, we're going to invite you in as our last speaker to do a brief overview of what you do and why you're so passionate about food. Xingyi, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Can you all see the slide? Okay, so I am Xingyi, and as you guys can see from the slide, I was born in a place where people value local and seasonal food a lot. These are all the fruits all year round in my hometown. And there is even a joke in my hometown that the real calendar for us is not the paper one on our desk, but the food produced in our market. And also in my family, just as many speakers do, we also think food is essential. And I remember ever since when I was a child, when we travel to other places, the first thing we'll do is to search for the local farmers market and to visit them. Because of the geographic and history difference, the food displayed on the market are very different in different places. So, because of my interest in food, when I go to NYU, I choose nutrition as my major. And I got the chance to further investigate the relationship between human health and food. And then I find out that it seems there is some problem in our food system right now. So nowadays, our food system is getting us more and more far away from the original state of food. For example, when you take out a bag of Oreos, the ingredients on it is not something that a 3-year-old can easily pronounce. And you can't also imagine how all this food is produced, unlike a bowl of rice. So, and at the same time, our education is more focused on developing practical skills instead of teaching us how to be a healthy individual, both physically and mentally. Just as Hui mentioned, nowadays the nutrition or food education in the school is really lacked in many places. So when all this combined, healthy eating is no longer a very intuitive thing for many people now. So then I am thinking about if I can use my academic knowledge learned in class into something that the general public can happy to hear, easy to understand, and willing to take actions. So I began to do nutrition education in different places. I work with the Cancer Center in New York to try to make food a kind of relievement for people with serious illness. And I also work with the local NGO when I was exchanging in Czech Republic to try to destigmatize some diseases and try to teach about nutrition for the college students. And I also work with the local nursing home to teach the elderly about nutrition and to make suggestions for their menu. So what I focus more is still about the kids, because I think that the nutrition education for the kids is just like little seeds. So when you first implant them, it doesn't seem like a huge difference, but as time goes by, sooner or later, I believe it can sprout and it have beautiful leaves and it can be a nice tree. So I don't want to be the food place to dictate what you should or should not eat for those cute little ones. But I do want them to get to have a closer relationship with food. So I talked to them about what food is in season in our hometown. And I also talked to them how each food is grown and produced. Maybe next time I can include a class about seaweed. And I also see a lot of nice transitions of those kids. I remember when I go to a primary school, originally the kids really hate eating sweet potatoes and I don't know why. And in the class break time, I always see them eating like cookies or brownies. So it is very funny to me. And I designed a class especially for them to actually let them pick the sweet potatoes from the ground. And then we go to touch the texture of the sweet potatoes. We go to cut them, to smell them, and to steam them. And finally, I teach them using those sweet potatoes to make a cute Chinese little pastry without adding too much sugar or butter. And they turn out to like that. And they even want to bring more for their family and friends. And the next time I see them teaching to me and other teachers about all the health benefits of sweet potatoes, So it is really funny to me, and these changes also make me more convinced that maybe nutrition education can be one of the solutions for the kids or for the whole food system right now. So near the end of the speech, I would like to share a short clip of the food documentary I made with my friends during my high school. So I named the documentary Let the Dishes Speak because I am a firm believer that food can speak a lot. And what we human beings need to do is just to be quiet and to be patient to listen to what food is talking to us. And even if I am a nutrition student, I'm a science person, I also believe that food is not just about the calorie counting thing. It is about respecting the nature. It's about respecting what nature is offering to us, and then try to have a harmonious relationship with food.
正如美国作家保罗·柯艾略说：“耕耘者能认出彼此，因为他们知道每一株植物的生命历程都包含着整个世界的成长。”
Thank you.
I just want to double down on Charlene's comment in the chat. What beautiful metaphors you've provided us in terms of thinking about how food is so central to our social systems, to our social fabric, and how by helping nurture this love of food, this respect for food, we're actually developing a love for our planet. So really appreciate bringing so many themes together that we've already heard in these conversations so far. And now we're having an opportunity to move to a more open dialogue. So encouraging all of the speakers to come back to the floor and to really start exploring specific questions related to food systems. And I would love to, perhaps start with Xinyi, since you just came off. I'm curious for you, what's the biggest question that you get asked about food from the students that you meet? I'm curious if you can share with us the ways in which you encourage your students to respect food. Well, what's a main takeaway that we can do in our own lives when we meet young people to ensure that they are getting the same level of education that you're providing your students in the classroom?
So basically, I think there's two things that nowadays we really need to do in order to have a healthy body from nutritious food and also to have a friendly way with our nature. I think there's two things we need to do. The first is that I think we have to be critical to everything we learn from the internet, because there is so many people teaching you about how to eat healthy, and many of them maybe are from pseudoscience, or maybe it has some purpose from certain food companies. So we need to first have a systematical way of viewing food, and then we have to be critical not to take everything for granted. Because when I teach my kids, it's only like 8 classes. I can't teach them everything, but I need to teach them ways of be critical thinking and to search for the answer of the problem. And also, I think one of the things every young people can do is to know about what is in season, what food is in season, and what food is local in the place you are in and in your hometown. And it is a way to really to begin to pay attention to the food, and that is the first step to love the food, to love the nature. Yeah.
Xinyi, thanks for reminding us that, it starts from our own local community. It starts from us noticing the food around us, respecting the meals that we're having. And that really creates a behavioral shift in the way in which we're viewing our food systems, or an appreciation for the food systems that we live in. Hui, I want to invite you in, because what I found so interesting about the diagram that you shared was the fact that you're encouraging specific behaviors. And I'm curious for you, based on the work in terms of building this global movement, what have you found to be effective in getting people to take on these 17 actions? What have you found effective in terms of encouraging young people to take on these behavioral changes?
Hi, sorry for the technical issue just now. Can you hear me now? So we, as Xinyi has just addressed, we've also found it really helpful with an education of sustainable food systems, not only about the nutrition aspects of food, but also how our diets linked with livelihoods, linked with the health of our communities, the animals, and also the planet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Wei, in terms of underscoring this idea that it starts with us really respecting our planet. And that really comes at the core of creating these behavioral shifts to create changes in our food systems. Eduardo, would love to invite you in now, and maybe you can help us come at this question from a sense of hope, in terms of your own research, in terms of your own studies, what gives you hope in terms of the possibility for us to imagine or realize this food system transformation that needs to take place if we are to create a more sustainable and accessible food system for all?
Well, I think that at many levels, one of the probably main things that gives me hope is just the youth overall. I mean, it goes along pretty well with what we are here talking about today. I feel that nowadays, despite of the fact that sometimes there is these just like youth doesn't really want to be involved in agriculture anymore, but still on the other hand, there's still this great like passion and inspiration from current youth as well of being of innovating and of creating new solutions. And on the other end, we also gotta harness that, because it's just the power of millennials, how much technology, how much information we have available nowadays, and just the mere fact of how much innovation can come out of that. I think that's something really that motivates me a lot. It makes me at the same time makes me feel better of what's coming next, despite of the fact that obviously there's still huge challenges coming for us. But I believe a lot in our youth, and I have faith in them as well, and I have faith on future innovations, on coming up with new solutions, and overall just the passion and commitment that there still is towards just working together towards tackling these problems. So that would be really it.
Absolutely. And Eduardo, you're segueing us into this larger conversation on the role that young people play in food systems. And Charlene, I'd love to pick up on where Eduardo stopped, which is this idea of innovating, this idea of starting an initiative, this idea of proposing solutions. And Charlene, as a young entrepreneur, I'm curious if you can share with our listeners, folks who want to get started, what is that first step like? How did you get started? If you could just zoom us in a little bit in terms of coming up with this idea and moving it towards a reality.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thinking about my personal journey, I think it started quite serendipitously, because it happens where my passion for food aligns with my research interest, and where it worked out and merged into, aquaculture with seaweed. But for someone who kind of like still on the midst of like trying to discover what they can do with food and how they can support a more sustainable food system, I think a good place to start is first of all yourself and your community. Think about ways where you can, like right now, because of COVID, a lot of global supply chain is decimated. And not only the global supply chain is decimated, and a lot of local business, especially local food business, are being squeezed very tight due to economic pressure, etc. So look around yourself and start talking to people. Start asking, be like, oh, what can we do to make it better? How can we supply a healthier diet to the school or people who in need, and start looking at connection you can form that way. Interestingly, for my particular device, my particular innovation, I focus very, it seems like it's very technical, like I'm making this like really cool device that go on the water, but it started out with a conversation that I had with a seaweed farmer with the fish industry. And I was chatting with them, be like, oh, what is it that you guys need help with? And then they were like, oh, you know what'd be cool? Like once in a while we get this huge issue where like this whole batch of seaweed would just get sick and we don't know what to do about it. And that's how the idea came from. And just like, oh, I think I can make something to help. That's it. Just start a conversation. And then making those connections is how you make new things and how you bring people together and create something brand new.
Charlene, thank you so much for that really helpful advice of starting with this issue that you see in the world and thinking about how our personal gifts or strengths or skills can really connect and help close those gaps. Hui, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your model of change. How are you building this movement? How are you getting people involved? I know that, I'm interested in this idea of movement building. How have you been able to reach so many young people, and what's helped push that movement forward? If you can share with us some strategies or ways in which you've encouraged this conversation of food to really prosper.
Thank you for that meaningful question, Dustin. I just want to first address maybe some hard challenge that we face. As many of you have already mentioned, that we live on one planet Earth, and our consumption patterns directly contribute to the impacts of a global food system. Like we're experiencing floods recently in China, and also at a global scale, deforestation, rainforest fire, and pandemic. I think the biggest problem in my country when we promote food literacy is that I would say is that any sense of a global civic duty is lost to nationalism, and youth become apathetic over the challenges our world is facing. And here in China, we have language barriers, we have the social media barriers. And what is the worst? China is isolating itself in the global community, especially in a post-pandemic world. We need to recognize that unhealthy diets, overconsumption of meat is one of the most pressing issues for the overall health, as we experience more impacts in China from overweight, obesity, non-communicable, and food-related diseases, and also climate change. The resilience of food systems will come under greater threat. However, when it comes to we advocating for eating less meat, a major part of the population, even a major part of the young people, believe that there is a hidden agenda of the Western world. And that is a shame. The population are influenced by the propaganda of a bad political ideology, which is dangerous and a shame. We just can't afford failing the future generations. We can't afford failing the beauty of our planet Earth. And I would say things are just getting worse in a post-pandemic world. The science is crystal clear. It's not difficult to explain the drivers of the zoonotic disease emergence, called the Preventing the Next Pandemic report by UNEP. One, increasing demand for animal protein. Two, unsustainable agricultural intensification. And three, increased use and exploitation of wildlife. We know that a region of the COVID outbreak associated with the close contact of a wet market in Wuhan. It's just sad to see that when the pandemic seems under control, people get back to normal life and they don't care anymore about the root cause of the pandemic and don't care about how people in other parts of the world suffer. And even they started eating more meat, which would make the pandemic come back again and again. So we have to address your question, how we innovated with our programs, our models. We have, for instance, I'm working on food policy initiatives such as wet market reforms, because we saw the role and reputation of the wet market come under scrutiny after the outbreak of COVID. But in fact, most wet markets sell more veggies and fruits and remain the major source of fresh and affordable, nutritious food for many people. So to reform wet markets, and the first thing we do is to transform how people think about wet markets. We have a new interpretation, WET, for well-being, ecology, and transformation. And we edited a wet market handbook. It's a toolkit with key recommendations to really unleash the vast potential of wet markets to nudge healthy eating and also support local food systems and smallholder farmers. And now the handbook is being used as an instrument to engage city governments on innovative and youth-inclusive food governance programs, say policy bootcamp, where we have the research tools provided by Cambridge, and we have we will have around 50 students. They will work in teams and develop innovative solutions that can reform and improve our urban food environments by revolutionize our wet markets. And we also have some pop-up events which involve food educators, youth, local communities, and also chefs. They collaborated with the fresh food vendors and also the snack food vendors in the market to cook delicious plant-based dishes using the ugly ingredients that are sourced by the pop-up participants from the wet markets. So from policymaking to this kind of interactive food education programs, we engage multi-stakeholders, including youth, to really transform the way people think about food. And I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, wait, you've given us so much richness around the context that we're in right now about the COVID-19 context. But I think what you're ending with, which I think is so important, is the role of intergenerational partnerships and the role of multilateral collaboration, this idea that we need to build back better together. And it's only when we see across industries, across sectors, across fields that we're really able to catalyze the change that we need in our food systems. And I'm wondering if we can take this piece in terms of how the pandemic, how this particular moment has really impacted food systems. Eduardo, inviting you into this conversation now, based on your own perspective, how has COVID-19 impacted accessible food systems? How has COVID-19 really exacerbated some of the inequities that we're seeing?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the, I guess that the pandemic overall has just made kind of these problems overall show even more in Latin America overall. And if I think particularly in Honduras, I guess that overall, unfortunately, these regions are usually regions that are very unequal, despite of the fact that you might have a strong, high class overall, and probably you're going to have a strong economic power over there. On the opposite side, you're going to have people living in extreme poverty. So that's something really unfair, and kind of like relating it to the COVID-19 question. It's actually even kind of like mind-blowing at the same time to see that in this particular region of the world, despite of the pandemic, the people from the higher end of an economic power, we can call it, they have gotten even richer despite of the pandemic, and people that live in extreme poverty, they are still struggling even more to actually just get their basic needs, or in this case, the basic access of food, or of just being food secure. So definitely the pandemic has exacerbated the region, has stigmatized a little bit more some of the problems that obviously there are many other things from many other fronts, definitely including political problems, including many other aspects. But overall, in general, the pandemic definitely has been something that has affected the Latin American region. And again, it has just exacerbated the inequalities that the region is currently presenting, and that has traditionally and historically presented throughout time.
Yeah, Eduardo, thank you so much for just centering on this idea that the pandemic and this COVID-19 context has really made it hard to look away from the inequities that were already there, and it also has exacerbated some of the gaps that we're seeing. I'm wondering, Charlene, if you can help us surface some of the key challenges related to our food systems. I think we've talked generally that it's not working, but wondering if you can be a little bit more specific. What specifically is not working right now in our food systems?
There's a lot of different aspects. That's a really tough question to answer because it's quite a lot of different aspects. And I think I'll talk about the one that I feel like has the most potential for change, is the consumption part and the demand part, and how food is being advertised on TV. I think there's quite just a significant amount of data. For example, if you watch TV, watch commercial, the thing that's like constantly being advertised, like soda, potato chip, or like those like snack, and like you mentioned earlier, like they have ingredients that 3-year-old can't even pronounce. So it's like mystery ingredient that's like preservative, natural flavoring. It's like, what is that exactly? Nobody knows. And that is actually one of the biggest issues I think that we could have the most rapid changing in the food system currently, is how we advertise food, and how we, like you guys all passionate about how we teach food, in terms of how we make food, how we eat food, how we consume food. Where is the food coming from? When you eat a chicken leg, where's that chicken coming from? How did the chicken live? And exactly what did the chicken eat? And how did it end up on my plate? And those kind of things, if we are able to do a really good job communicating, I think that's a really good first step to let everyone know the current issue that's kind of hidden away from us in the food system. And by just knowing the problem that exists in this like hidden black box of food system is a very good first step in terms of improving it. So I guess coming back to your question, Dustin, it just, what is the biggest issue right now? I think I would say is the fact that the food system, the engine behind the food system right now, the fact that it's so obscure, is almost like a black box from our current everyday life, is one of the biggest issues that we're facing. And one of the issues that I feel like we had the most potential in changing right away.
Yeah, Charlene, thank you so much for noting this recognition gap. We sort of are surrounded by food every day, are involved in food, but knowing where our food comes from and ensuring that it's coming from a sustainable pathway or a sustainable system certainly is something that individuals can take on in terms of their own discovery, and is a way in which I'm sure a lot of folks have already talked about can make changes in terms of people's behaviors. And I want to invite Xingyi into this conversation now, because I know that that has to do with the work that you're doing. I would love to hear your response to any of the conversations that we've had so far, and also ask you, I know that you're working on the ground, but from your perspective, what are some policy changes that need to be made in order for us to transform our food systems? Wondering if we can talk at a higher level now. We know that the work on the ground is so important, and it needs to come in collaboration with policies, practices, and resource flows. So wondering if we can hear your thoughts on anything that's been said so far, but also what policy changes would you recommend for leaders or decision makers at tables today?
Okay, thanks for asking these questions. And I really have a strong impression with what they just mentioned about like how COVID is impacting. So it's not just because I'm mainly based in New York and in Suzhou. So these are the so-called the places with more economic power, but still I see that the pandemic is still influencing our lifestyle, especially at the beginning, because people are more and more tended to eat more processed food or the more takeout food, especially for young people, even if they are very talented in their areas, but sometimes they don't know how to manage a meal for them, and they don't know how to even order a balanced meal from outside and eat in a sustainable, no waste way. So I really think that the pandemic is influencing us in these ways, but also I even believe that sometimes pandemic can even be a way of transforming or a way of like breaking through point, because I also see that because of the pandemic, many of the health professionals or the professionals in other areas, they are doing the sharings or education online. They begin to open up the health education or the online courses or the blog posts. Nowadays, it's not only the so-called or the traditional bloggers are doing the sharing, but more and more people with like professional background, and even our speakers are doing this kind of work. So it actually breaks the boundaries to make people from other places more and more accessible to the knowledge with some credibility. So I also think that it can be a transition point to many of us included. And for the policy change level, I also agree with many of you said, like how we need to make it more clear about how the food is produced and how to make people, especially the young people, more involved in the whole food production system. And I think there is two things that the policy level really need to facilitate. One is that for the food packaging. So there are so many exaggerated claims on the package, both in China or in US or in other countries. So there is even a saying that when you see a food, don't look at the claims, but just look at the label. So I do think that there should be more regulations and enforcements on the food packaging and also the food advertisement, because we need to think about why nowadays, when we see the television or when we search on the internet, all the food is advertising is those big companies advertising the more processed food. But I'm thinking of if there can be more regulations on the percentage of these advertisement, or if there can be some of the chances that the more small business can be involved in, they can be more seen. And also, I also agree that there's many of the actions Hui is also doing is that the education for the younger people, maybe many schools, they can have the chances to have more about the nutrition education, and also teaching them to how to have no waste or a more sustainable living. Like I have seen many schools, even including my own primary school, they doing like urban farms, or they get the kids more involved in the process. They are preparing and cleaning up the lunch. So maybe there is some policy level can do for the education system to have a better focus on food besides like Chinese, English, mathematics. Yeah.
Jeannie, thank you so much for that. And I think it's reminding us that we need to think about these policy changes to meet these really critical challenges that we're seeing. And Eduardo, I see you nodding, curious if I can invite you in. What policy changes are you foreseeing, or what policy changes would you like to see happen in order to transform our food system?
Well, that's an excellent question again, and well, with such amazing ideas that have already been shared, I think that I would incline towards that change, that probably the role and probably regulations that are out there towards the businesses overall, as they were talking about small enterprise as well and medium enterprise. And I guess that overall, because in the end, we all form part of these agri-food chain, right? We perceive food, and this food definitely came from a source, right? So I think that the regulations sometimes are important, enough regulations so that they can incentivize a market where there's always that constant reminder of the social impact that company is particularly doing, right? Because in the end, it's not only about money, but as I was saying back in my presentation, just the philosophy of the idea that every business, and in this case we're talking about agriculture, the agri-food sector, every business should try and aim towards making this world a better place. And I think that particular regulation is underappreciated in certain economies, and particularly in the Latin American region, at least, is just something that is still underappreciated. And due to the fact that there's still no incentive, it's like there's no one actually pushing these companies, these people, to actually be better at it, right? Probably educating people better as well, reminding themselves of the sustainability of their actions as well, because in the end, we're talking about food systems. We immediately relate it with our natural resources. And if there's no sustainability involved behind the practices of the food that we're actually consuming, I don't see how the whole model, the whole concept of actually achieving food security is going to be something sustainable towards the long term. So I think that's something really important, and not only regulations that imply economic incentives, but in the end, just the whole concept of actually adequately conserving our natural resources, because in the end, that's going to be something that we all are going to benefit from. If we don't pay close attention to this, we are actually not going to have future generations in order to actually care of. So I think that's something really, really important that we really need to get better at.
Eduardo, thanks for reminding us that the food system is connected to so many other production systems that we're a part of, and the need to think more expansively about where our food comes from and how it's packaged and the way in which it arrives at our table is certainly an important theme that I've heard across all of our speakers today. At this point, I'm going to start surfacing some questions that we're getting from our audience today. And the first question I'm going to direct to Hui Yu and Charlene. This question is around what it means to have a plant-based diet. What are the benefits? And perhaps more importantly, folks have been naming, the fact that they may feel some sort of shame for consuming meat. And I'm just curious if we can just shed some perspective or your personal opinion on that matter. Hui Yu, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the question. So from sharing from my personal story, the motivation that I've become vegan is, first, I want to reduce food loss and waste, because as I mentioned, that way too much grains are used as feed to raise the animals for animal protein, and that is inefficient. And second, I think a plant-based diet is not only, of course, by plant-based diet, I mean you eat a diverse diet of adequate vegetables and fruits and also legumes and nuts is healthy for our body, but also it reduces animal sufferings, it reduces zoonotic disease, and also it respects our biodiversity and smallholder and regenerative farming practices. So I think that I just stop there with some benefits, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Wei. And Charlene, you got a shout out in this question: tofu, seaweed, among other fruits and vegetables. Charlene, curious your thoughts. Inviting you in.
Yeah, I love tofu and I obviously love seaweed. And I think the reason I switched to a plant-based diet is because it's a responsible thing to do. I think it's responsible not just for the planet, but it's also a responsible thing to do for my own personal health and my own personal belief. I'm doing research, trying to make the world a more sustainable place. And I'm thinking I'm doing this work and I should be able to change my lifestyle to fit what I believe in. And this is one of the big motivation for me to transition to switch to a very plant-focused diet. But I want to address the second point is that the person says she like tofu, like seaweed, but also likes beef. So if you're ashamed, definitely not. Because in the natural world, right, farming back in the day, farming isn't just you're putting plants. It's actually a combination of animal husbandry along with the plants and farming together. The ideal situation for farming and food production is that there's harmony. Like we're talking about with seaweed, seaweed doesn't quite exist on its own. It's actually seaweed and fish had to exist and coexist together. So when you eat beef, I recommend when you do it, you do it very don't do it too much. That's definitely the big point. And when you do it responsibly. Don't just go to supermarket and pick out the cheap package of beef that's labeled and ground and you don't really know where it comes from. But instead, go to a local butchery that they actually know where the beef is coming from, like how they raise the cow in a sustainable way, in a regenerative way, and be more responsible in the food that you're purchasing. But you should not feel guilty for liking to eat meat-based food. Some people just have, if they enjoy it, just do it in a way that's responsible.
Thank you so much to both of you for those perspectives on reasons why you folks chose a plant-based diet. There's another question related to diet here. And Chinyi, I'm going to invite you in as our resident nutritionist right now. What does a healthy diet look like? What does a healthy diet mean? We're seeing a few questions around young people wanting to ask you, what does that even look like?
The healthy diet is actually very simple. So you need to take out your hand. So every healthy plate, you need to have just this much. Everyone's hand is different size because everyone have different calorie needs. But this amount of whole grains, better. If you want to eat rice, it's also okay. Sweet potatoes or rice, this amount, and also this amount of proteins. And it don't necessarily need to be beef, but it can also be tofu or some tempeh, all this kind of stuff. And then when we take this amount of the whole grains and this amount of nice proteins, and then the left of the plate, please fill it with fresh vegetables and fruits. And then that is what a healthy plate needs to be like. And also, moreover, the healthy eating is not just about calories, as I always say. So it is also about how you need to be mindful in eating and how you feel good and you feel grateful for your food. And I also think it is a very psychological and mental thing to be really focused on when you're eating, and you need to feel great after you eat.
I know that I'm walking away with a framework that I'm going to use at dinner tomorrow. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chinyi. Huiyu, I'd love to invite you into this question that we're getting around bringing awareness to young people and helping young people get started who may be unfamiliar to food systems or the issues that we're facing. I'm wondering if you can share any stories or at least share any guidance around how we can encourage young people to get started on getting involved in these food systems and raise the awareness on these really critical issues.
Thank you for the question. It's really challenging. We're still like working hard to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Food system, like I said, is a complex and very broad issue for many young people that they find it difficult to relate to their personal lives. So we do a lot of like podcast programs to dive into the topics that audience can relate to their personal lives, like eating takeout and processed food, how it impacts their health, and other topics like wet market versus supermarket, how your consumption patterns can link with the supply chains, and how you are supporting the local growers and producers by choosing different food environments. So, and we also connect our media campaigns with the hot topics, like we're experiencing floods, and that is caused by climate change, and to just like to catch the attention of people and tell them the inner links and the dynamics of our food system, to connect the dots of the food system and to enable them to jump out of the food system box, to gradually promote the literacy that food system is a systematic issue.
Yeah.
Wei,
thank you so much for just reminding us that we need to make it personal, right? The fact that we're all connected to food. We've heard so many stories about how we're connected to food, and the way in which we can actually connect food systems to other catastrophes that we're seeing in the world. Just to, the really heartbreaking floods that we're seeing in China right now are certainly just an example of climate action and the need for climate action. And I'm wondering, Eduardo, bringing you into this question that we received from an audience member, how can we gain the public and political support necessary for food systems transformations, knowing that we have a very limited time to counteract the critical changes that are happening due to climate change? So how do we do this work in a meaningful way? How do we encourage public and political support to really avert the climate catastrophe that we're seeing currently?
Wow, well, thank you first of all for the question. Huge, mind-blowing question, by the way. I'm gonna say that right off the bat, but I think that although it sounds very complex, I think that the change, and again, I don't want to sound too simplistic, but I think that despite of the fact that it's simplistic, it's still really challenging. It's just the fact that it starts with us, really. Like the real change starts with us, because in the end, as I was coming back to my first words, we that's why I still have hope, because I know there's definitely a youth that it's inspired. They wanna innovate. They have so many tools nowadays. And definitely they just have the power to actually make a change in this world. And yes, we have limited time. That's very true. But on the other hand, I have strong faith on the idea that this youth really has the power to actually make a difference. And these changes really, they don't have to be a radical from one day to the other. I mean, we've heard so many good examples just with being conscious of what you're eating, right? Just tracking what is it that you're eating. That's already giving a message that definitely that we are in for a change, that we want to be heard, and that we definitely want to be recognized and also supported, more importantly, for this change. Because in the end, I always say that that's one of the main reasons why I absolutely love transdisciplinary work, and why I have completely enjoyed just what my other fellow speakers have shared, because in the end, it's all about synergies and about taking advantage of what, the just those characteristics and those positive things that everyone else has, so that you can actually make a greater change. So I think that really the change starts with us, so that we can really get heard, they can really hear us, and on the other hand, that we can also really get supported towards a food secure future.
Eduardo, thank you for that really critical call to action, where it's actually perhaps simpler than we think. I think it starts with us centering this conversation, making sure that it's personal, and really taking a lot of the themes that we've heard from our speakers so far. I want to take maybe one or two more questions from our Slido. This one I'm going to direct to Charlene. Charlene, I'm curious, there's a question here about technology. What are some potential ways in which we can leverage technology to game up and reach out to a larger group, but more particularly perhaps to meet the needs of this food system problem that we've been describing? Curious if you can highlight or surface any potential innovations that are really making you excited about the potential to leverage technology to meet these gaps.
Oh yeah, I love sharing about new technology. I think besides the project I'm working on personally, one of my favorite, obviously, another really cool technology is happening is actually preserving food, which is actually very important, because technically we have, like, our world food production is actually enough to feed the entire world population. But one of the few challenges that kind of inhibits that is, first of all, how do we keep food fresh and not let it go to waste? So one of the big technology, like, let's talk about like actual technology that's coming ahead, is actually a really cool mechanism. I'm gonna get a little nerdy here, but it's like a silk material that kind of wraps around the produce. And the silk material, that's like a coating that wraps on the produce, prevents it from getting oxidized, or in this case, rotten. And it keeps it fresh longer. And by keeping the food longer, there are ways for us to get it out to people who need it, or like distribute it and like send it away to places that actually can use, like eat a fresh apple, etc. And that's actually really exciting technology that's like solely in development and also about to kind of hit the breaking point where it can be commercialized. So that's a really cool thing. Other technology you can think about is just like different farming devices. There's more precision farming. So farming that are trying to minimize the use of pesticide, or more organic farming where they're like measuring what's happening in the soil, like our water research, like the soil science, just to understand what is the optimal way we can do it without creating, like, to minimize the impact that we're adding to the environment. That's also really good technology, is in the interjunction of like chemistry, biology, and robotics. So any of you guys are interested in that, this is a really cool field. Yeah, I can speak more about technology, but those are like pretty big ones.
Charlene, I'm ready for those to become mainstream. I'm ready to incorporate them into my daily life. Thank you so much for shedding some light on those. I'm keeping an eye on time. I know we're closing in. So in the interest of time, I'm hoping we can do one last go around. I'm wondering if each of you can maybe share one takeaway from the conversation that you had being part of this dialogue, and one call to action you have for the young people listening with us today. Xinyi, I'm going to invite you in first as our brave first go. I'm encouraging you to share with us one takeaway you're walking away with from this dialogue, and also one call to action you have for young people listening.
Yeah, I think it's just to start from small points. And I think everyone can be the food educator for yourself, and you can be someone that have a harmonious relationship with the nature and food.
Thank you so much, Xinyi. I'm curious if I can invite Eduardo now. Eduardo, I'm curious for you, what's one takeaway you're walking away with from this discussion? And more importantly, your call to action to the young people listening.
Well, I can definitely walk away feeling actually really excited that we definitely have a lot of good ideas, a lot of good spirit, and a lot of commitment towards this huge challenge that we have ahead of us. So that's actually really comforting at the same time. And if there was something that I would like call to action and share with everyone that is here today, I would say that most importantly, whatever you do it with all your heart. And second of all, this problem that we have might seem impossible. However, don't dare, please, always dare to make possible what seems impossible. So it was amazing having this time with you all.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. It starts with us being able to imagine a different future. That certainly is resonating with me. Hui, inviting you in, what's one takeaway you're walking away from this conversation and also your call to action?
My takeaway is that I learned so many innovative interventions to raise awareness among youth on food issues. And my call to action is youth just be used to ask the simple and hard question to policymakers to influence policymaking. And I call on policymakers to be more innovative and youth inclusive.
Thank you so much for you. And Charlene, ending with you, curious, one takeaway that you're having from this dialogue, and also one call to action for young people listening in today.
I think the biggest takeaway from this dialogue is, I think it's hope. It's a feeling that like we could do this. And the call to action is we could do this. So let's do this. Yeah.
Charlene, thanks for bringing us on a note of hope. And I want to just take a moment to describe what this dialogue really means. Right? I'm walking away with a sense of hope, a light, and a clarity that our ability to build a better world starts from our ability to imagine that one exists. I think in so many of your work, it starts with us being able to imagine a world that does not yet exist. And I think that's where we see young people really thrive. Young people bringing the creativity, the innovation, and the spirit of imagination that we need in this moment to meet the critical issues. And imagine the world that we would be living in if every single person brought the same level of joy and imagination that each and every one of you have brought here today. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you on behalf of all the organizers, and just really appreciate the leadership and the work that you all have done in order to push forward this transformation in food systems that we need to happen. So at this point, I know that we have some announcements and a call to action from the Tzu Chi Foundation as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the virtual floor back over to Shander. Shander, over to you.
Thank you, Dustin, Eduardo, Hui, Xingyi, and Charlene for the very insightful, engaging, and inspirational discussion. So I've learned so much from it. Like for me to pick a personal takeaway, I think something that really struck out to me is Xingyi like describing how my plate would look like, and that is something I will try my best to follow. So without further ado, could we all just switch on our camera and let's take a group photo together. So my coworker will be screenshotting, all right? So let's all smile in 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you, coworkers. So before we close today, I actually have one last question for everyone. What will you do to contribute to a sustainable food system? What is in your sustainable plate? Please head over to the chat and respond to the question above. Your ideas will help us design our next event called 30-Day Challenge for My Sustainable Plate. In that one, thank you everyone for your responses. Here are the upcoming events in 2021. To learn more about them and get the most updated information, please follow us on our social media on Facebook and Instagram at TzuChiYL. So thank you everyone. While you are signing off, I'm going to play the song I Like to Move It. And I hope everyone will meet us again. Thank you everyone for joining our roundtable.
Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo es para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo es para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Macarena tiene un novio que se llama de apellido Vitorino, y en la jura de bandera del muchacho